Rent-seeking just means that you have power and you seek to monetize your power by exploiting the mass. All right? So basically landlords are a classic type of rent-seeking elite. And so they don't really work, but they make a lot of money because they own the land, because they control all the resources, because they control all the capital. And that forces the mass to go into slavery, to go into debt, which is what's happening in America today. The problem with this is that everyone wants to be part of the elite, and there are too many elite over time. Okay? So even though the elite have many kids, the power is a zero-sum game, it's a hierarchy. And so this leads to the idea of elite overproduction. Okay? Elite overproduction. This is a term coined by the historian Peter Turchin. Okay? And his theory is that you have turmoil, you have wars. For example, the French Revolution, for example, the fall of the Roman Republic, because there's too many elite and they start wars to accumulate power for themselves. Okay? So this organization, this elite, leads to basically factionalism or infighting. And that's what's happening in America today, where the Democrats and the Republicans, they hate each other, they refuse to get along. It leads to political polarization. Okay? So another saying this is that an empire over time becomes insular. They don't care about what happens outside the world. All they care about is what happens in Washington, D.C. And as a result, they make a lot of stupid mistakes. Okay? All right. Now, the last thing is death. Okay, the problem with death is that if there are no consequences to your actions, you become arrogant, you become lazy, and you become incompetent, okay? Because you don't care. It doesn't really matter. And this leads to the idea of hubris. Okay? Hubris is just blindness to your own arrogance, a violent arrogance that makes you make silly mistakes, but you don't recognize your mistakes and you keep on repeating the same mistakes over and over again. All right? So, yes, it seems like the empire is invincible, but if you actually think about it, the empire, its advantages becomes over time its disadvantages, which will lead ultimately to its downfall. Okay? So the mass leads to inequality, the organization leads to overproduction, which leads to factionalism, and death leads to hubris. That's why an empire must fall over time. But an empire cannot fall by itself. It needs an enemy that forces it to collapse. Okay? And so what happens is that an enemy will emerge that will overwhelm the empire because it is able to take advantage of the weaknesses of the empire. Right? And so, what are the weaknesses of this empire? Well, the first major weakness of this empire is that the people aren't really motivated. So if you as people are really motivated, you have a huge advantage, okay? We call this energy. Right? Now, as an empire, you become insular. You refuse to admit your mistakes. You refuse to learn from others. Well, if you are willing to admit your mistakes, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to promote the best and brightest, if you're willing to be meritocratic, you have a huge advantage, okay? And so this idea of openness. Now, the last idea is this. An empire, it's fractured. So if you're able to maintain cohesion, if people are able to remain united, if they're able to have a common purpose, they'll be strong, okay? So if an enemy of the empire emerges with these three qualities, energy, openness, and cohesion, this enemy will defeat the empire. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I want you to focus on as you follow the news in this war between the United States and Iran is ask yourself a question. Will Iran become an energetic, open, and cohesive society? Because if it does, it will become invincible. The empire won't change because of hubris. It's too static, it's too stagnant, it's too bureaucratic. So the empire won't change. The empire will not admit its own mistakes. And quite honestly, Iran, because it's still a country of 92 million people, it still suffers from issues of mass organization and death. And so if it's able to transform itself into an energetic, open, and cohesive society, then it will triumph over America. That is the fundamental question in this war, okay? Don't worry about America, its technology. Don't worry about the economy. Don't worry about these things, okay? Just ask yourself one question. Is Iran transforming as a society? Are people becoming much more motivated? Are people in Iran learning from their mistakes and innovating and becoming resilient on the battlefield? Are the Iranians sticking together as a people? Okay? Because if the answer is yes to all three questions, then Iran will win and America will lose. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So that's just a theory. So let's now talk specifically about America and Iran, okay? So America will have three major advantages in this war, okay? These three advantages are of course, technology, propaganda, and money, wealth. These are the three major strengths of the American empire. All right? Technology is just what you see every day, right? The satellites that are able to precision target these airplanes that are the greatest war machines in the world.